My name is Terry McConnell. I work with the United Nations Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development, the DECADE, as the lead for the DECADE Coordinating Office for Ocean Observing. My background, however, is commercial, 30 plus years with a company called Fugro in the ocean observing space. My job today is to help prepare the ocean observing system that we as society need for the future. Our panel discussion will address the question, how does the private sector leverage Bluetech innovation for business advantage? And together with my fellow panelists, we hope to provide you with some guidance and next steps on how to get engaged, how to be successful as entrepreneurs in this expanding blue economy. So the format that we'll use is a series of questions, each one initially directed at one of our panelists, and then we'll have a round table discussion with the rest of the panel, each question lasting about 7 minutes. So please be introduced to our panelists, and I'll let them introduce themselves.
Hello, everyone. A lot of friends out there. Thank you, Tino and team, for putting this together. My name is Jason Kelly. Currently, I am the director of the Chafee Center at Bryant University. I'm wearing a different hat today, but I bring up the university because higher ed has such an important role to play, and we're building a trade accelerator. We're going to be, looking at sustainable supply chain, and we're going to be looking at AI to help bring in the data that we need to do that job. So if you're interested in that, talk to me offline afterwards. Today, I'm on this panel because I just retired from 30 years in the private sector and working for a large shipping and logistics company that has been, our whole industry has been quite disruptive. And I think that the notion of Bluetech today is really a timely one.
Thank you, Jason. I'm Ed Cesar with See Ahead. We are an investment and innovation company for the ocean. And I can't go on without thanking Jason and Mark Huang for all of their efforts in getting See Ahead founded and started. Thank you guys so much for that. I do a bunch of things at See Ahead. Maybe most pertinently today, serve as entrepreneur in residence for our Blue Swell Incubator Accelerator program. I'm sort of the IRR guy, helping them find their way to the promised land of organic cash break even, which, as you all know, is not easy in this sector. So hopefully I can give some insight along those lines.
Thank you. And Tino, thank you for bringing the group together. And a very interesting panel, as I've learned since we started talking. My name is Lee Silvestre, and my background is steeped in applied mathematics, ops research, engineering. I've got my early feet wet with national security, national defense, and the blue sector. And I developed a keen passion for what that meant when I was with Raytheon, about a 14-year journey with some of you in this room, a 14-year journey bringing the $800 million effort into a $6.2 million business. The world was relatively peaceful at the time, and I was told, hey, take your hand, try your hand at our portfolio of technology for non-defense applications. And I learned the incredible opportunity to see what it was like to take technologies developed in one market and bring it over to the other. Learned a lot about cross-section domains. Went from there, started a small company, won't go into that. That was incredibly insightful. And then went on to develop the Undersea Technology Innovation Consortium. My most recent role, current role, I got tapped on the shoulder by ONR to be a person outside the gates of the Navy, Office of Naval Research, ONR, to sit in the community, sit in industry, and understand in adjacent markets, in dual use applications, as they call them, what technologies are out there that would be relevant to the naval space, and how to then reach inside the gates of Navy to counterparts that I have along the East Coast and see if we can make a duck out of a technology that wasn't necessarily developed for a naval application. So with that, thank you.
As you can see, we've got quite a panel with overlapping but quite different areas of expertise. And the three questions that I have will focus on their areas of expertise and the overlap. So the first question is for Jason. You mentioned you have a solid marine shipping background. in addition to being a Bluetech entrepreneur. So following the lead of our panel two, or our panel one participants, can you speak to how the maritime shipping sector might leverage Bluetech startups? How can these two parties jointly identify a business opportunity and then develop that into a solid business model?
Thanks for that question. I guess there's so many different verticals within maritime. There's the efficiency vertical, there's the safety vertical, there's the sustainability vertical. I'll just tackle sustainability for a moment. You know, we've got some real intractable problems in shipping. Even though we're the most efficient way from a carbon standpoint to bring goods around the world, the scale of the industry is so large that we contribute over 3% of the global carbon emissions. So it's a real issue. We're hitting right whales. We've been talking about them on the news because they're up our way. We're transporting invasive species. I mean, these are very difficult problems. And you know, for me, I got frustrated in the early 2000s because I just felt as though that we couldn't regulate our way out of this. We needed to innovate our way out. And I think from a Bluetech standpoint, we've seen incredible growth within the last 5 years of startups who are addressing successfully these issues, and it excites me greatly.
Will Ed and Lee?
I agree with everything Jason said. Working with startups in the maritime space, I must say I have continually impressed and surprised with the intentionality of the industry towards decarbonization and alternative fuels. I've been to a few shipping conferences, and you sort of expect some old crusty guys who are in the three martini crowd, and there's regulation and the EU system driving it to a large extent, but it's not just that. The industry is really committed to energy transition, and I've really been surprised about that pleasantly.
So related to this, one of the areas of emphasis I'm seeing recently in national security is a refocus on big shipbuilding. Yet I know so many of our challenges, and it does affect national security, has nothing to do with big ships, has nothing to do with shipbuilding. It has to do with issues that can be dealt with autonomously, with small drones, with undersea surveillance, so on and so forth. And I also see within the big ship arena a reluctance to take new solutions, new ideas, particularly on the naval side, I'm talking, because if it doesn't hit a program of record years prior, in many years prior, the shipbuilders don't want to hear about it. They don't want to incorporate it in designs. They're not paid to do new technology. They're paid to do something to a spec. And that's a problem we've got to tackle. How do we bring challenges to near term, to real time, and be able to move much more efficiently, much like the private sector can do, to remedy a problem?
There are two groups that are currently working on the concept of developing new technologies for installation on shipping vessels, or any size vessels for that matter. One of those is the Ocean Decade, which has a Vessels of Opportunity program, and they're looking to engage with the large shipping sectors to outfit those vessels with met-ocean data and weather sensors, again, to collect data in the open ocean as they transit from A to B. The other is a group in Barcelona called the World Ocean Council, and I saw that Isabella, who represents that group, is online here with us. And they also engaging with the shipping sector to look at how can they put sensors on those vessels. The other issue is how do they get the data off of those sensors and into a usable location, but that's a second problem. But therein lies an opportunity for the Bluetech sector, for the private sector who wants to innovate new technologies.
Yeah, those of us that have been around the startups, the Bluetech startups over the last 10 years, we've seen a lot of projects that are looking at putting sensors, IoT sensors on containers, for example. There was a company called Nakai Robotics that that had a robot that was hull cleaning, but they were going to put on top of the core technology, just monitoring technology from a science standpoint. So those examples that you mentioned are really important. They're kind of, grabbing a larger, amount of vessels, but these other opportunities to connect to startups and other technologies, I think, are going to put a dent in it as well.
Ed?
Thinking about getting data from a instrumented container or off a ship of opportunity. I do think it's important to mention that Starlink is a game changer for that whole arena, as well as ocean data collection generally. So thanks, Elon, for that anyway.
While we're on the topic of industry sectors, what are some other industry sectors that we could look having the Bluetech engage with? One of them that I'm trying to work with is the insurance sector. They're trying to understand the risk and resilience of the coastal environment. They need help big time to do that. And data is, they have a lack of data to understand that risk, that resilience. Lee?
So one of the activities I was involved with recently was through the Blue Innovation Symposium, and we brought the UK, Canada, and US together to talk about some of our shared challenges across the North Atlantic. And what became an early concept, the North American Ocean Alliance, kind of has evolved into a charter. And I have almost been pleasantly surprised at the amount of energy and enthusiasm around pursuing certain initiatives. That space is really important in terms of coming up with solutions that are shared across countries and that we can invest in together. And I would suggest that we pay attention to that space, because together we can do something, a 1 + 1 = 3, that we can't do individually.
Okay, we'll move on to our next question. This one is for Ed. As the entrepreneur in residence at See Ahead, your experience in linking startups to interested investors will be critical in the coming years. You mentioned during our earlier discussions that the marketplace will not pay for data. It will pay for solutions. Startups need to consider this because their venture capital backers definitely do. Can you comment further on this?
Sure. I think I'd answer Terry in 4 ways quickly. Despite the growth in the Bluetech markets, it's a nascent and coalescing marketplace, which dictates, I haven't seen the killer app yet in the blue space. Don't think it exists yet. And I think that dictates some operational and capital strategies, meaning you need to gear your business at the same rate the marketplace is coalescing and building. Otherwise, you're going to outrun your money. Otherwise, you'll absorb too much capital to make a return on it. And the timing is really a tricky thing. Connected to your comment about the insurance company, also important to think about where your data will intersect a value chain. At See Ahead, I think we're beginning to think that the value that startups might see in the insurance space really is better targeted towards asset owners who have a more direct stake in the game, if you will. One very general point would be to think about, as an ocean data collection company, how do I provide the next unit of data at the lowest cost? A really simple formula, which might be useful in guiding a business. Maybe the promised land, speculatively, is when we get to a point where the ocean data market is a market, like any other market, almost like an asset class, like securities or real estate or crypto. And what does a successful marketplace like that need? It needs liquidity, where data and value can shuttle back and forth between providers and end users. And it needs pricing rationality. So we're a long way from there, but that held out as maybe the promised land. I think that's an important thing to keep in mind. And then I think, as Lee can speak to more eloquently than you all can, is we've got to find a way to solve this data siloing problem, where we can make data accessible easily across a bunch of platforms, a bunch of users, and a bunch of providers.
Before anybody jumps on that last one, that's our last question for Lee, so we'll touch that later.
Yeah.
One of the things that I've found in working with the scientists of the Ocean Decade is that the pitches that they create looking for funding, for support, for partners, are all based upon scientific features. This is what I'm doing. They don't speak the language of benefits, which, if we're going to engage with the public sector, we need to assist our scientific community to develop pitches that refocus on the benefits of what they're doing. And you mentioned that is the dollar aspect of it. The scientific community is ready to engage now with the commercial sector. They need our help, but they need our help also in learning how to do that.
Yeah, one of the things we pound on our cohort members at Blue Swell, some of which are in the room, is the journey begins with customer discovery. Who is going to pay for it? How do you get your first customer? And that's the way startups should think, is not how do I get my next chunk of capital? How do I get my first customer?
Lee?
I think there's also a challenge with the various domains and industries that share challenges, but yet have different languages, different ways of communicating, different profitability measures. I mentioned that North Atlantic Ocean Alliance, and one of the things that surfaced in the discussion was a shared and very passionate need to address what's happening with deep sea and seafloor cabling. And it was interesting for me to see and I think for all of us to see the various industries that are impacted by data that flows across the seafloor, from insurance, we mentioned, to communications, to investment, to certainly national security, to oil and gas, energy, and you can go on and on. That type of urgent challenge, because cables are being breached, cables are being severed, and the Navy will tell you this is a big problem, much less all the other domains that believe it's a problem or know it's a problem. Part of the problem is translating that to what it means to them, the urgency, the disruption, and then how they would go off and address it. But it's got to be a beautiful territory for a shared solution set.
One of the statistics that I hear quoted many times is that from the finance community, is that there is 10 times more money to be invested in the blue economy than there are investable projects, which is a great news. It's also disturbing news because we're obviously not doing a good enough job of pitching ourselves to the people with the money. Can you comment on that?
Yeah, I think it goes back to my initial response to your question about the nascent nature of the blue economy markets. One thing investors hate is to have to make a leap of faith. They'd like line of sight to a cash-on-cash return, recognizing that that line is going to bend and shift over time, but some line of sight. And frequently, we don't have that yet in the blue economy. So that requires a leap of faith, which investors hate to make. Some will. Hopefully to their benefit. But that's part of the issue in the blockage of available capital to deployed capital.
Lee, the final question for the group. During your career exploring the intersection of Bluetech opportunities across the Department of Defense and commercial sectors, you've noted the abundance of siloed and isolated data feeds, data sources, different data formats. If selected data across the Bluetech space could be brought together and integrated and related and processed, we might be able to create single panes of glass to enable these integrated insights and knowledge from the data, thereby helping companies further than just what the basic individual data sets produce. Can you comment on this?
I can. And to do this, I kind of went back to my Six Sigma background and I thought, how would you solve a problem like this? Because it's an urgent problem that we haven't quite adequately characterized. It starts with identifying common and compelling need to do some mission challenges, shared problems. And if we can, just like the deep sea cabling issue, if we can start with shared interest in a challenge across multiple domains, that's where it would start. So once we find a challenge, what are the key components? There's got to be urgency and importance associated with the challenge. Furthermore, in addition, there's got to be an association of data, because we're here to talk about data, along with key characteristics like profitability, performance, functionality. If we can do those two things, urgency and importance with the association of data to things that business domains care about, there is the cause for action. And as we have touched upon, there's nothing more compelling than a shared problem across industries to get people moving. Also, the category of data itself, the term, that's a massive term. It means something to everybody. I believe that once we talk about data, we have to identify, relative to that shared problem, what is the specific data we're talking about? What are the data needs? What are the types of data we're talking about? It can't be across the board like breathing air. It has to be specific to what we need. Then the data can be characterized and defined. Until that happens, we can't hope to see tangible action. And to make this meaningful, whatever happens has to move into tangible action and results for next steps. Additionally, before the correct data is identified and shared, there should be a transition of insight as to what do we need from the data. Data's out there, but what do we need from it should be in the form of transforming it into either intelligence or insights. Data alone sometimes doesn't get us there. So if I had to do a Six Sigma flow, it starts with urgent needs, urgent shared needs, transitions to what required intelligence or insights do we need, transitions to what then data sources and data feeds are we looking at, of course, who is responsible for those feeds, who has them, who needs them. And then we can move to the fun stuff, which is, the formatting, the protocols, the security measures, the pricing, communication methods, so on and so forth. So it's my way of saying, I think for this challenge, we have to work through the what, the why, and the who before the how becomes apparent.
Ed or Jason, do you have any thoughts?
Well, I don't know how I can follow that. I think I would agree 100% with everything that you said, Lee. How's that for getting off from it? I'll just say that maybe a little note of hope that from 40,000 feet, I remember when President Obama was pushing his ocean plan, the first ocean plan that the U.S. was going to do, and the Ocean Conservancy was working up in the Northeast. Of course, we were ahead of the game, and the shipping industry fought it tooth and nail because they were, they like, uniformity and regulation. If they thought there was a regional approach to bringing on data, that would be a threat. But now, this many years later, the shipping industry is really coming forth and providing data for free because, number one, there's commercial opportunity, and number two, it's the right thing to do. So hopefully in another 10 years, we'll start seeing some of these intractable solutions completely in our rearview mirror thanks to startups.
Yeah, I think, there are a lot of governmental, non-governmental, and startups working on this problem. You think of like Copernicus, EmoNet, HubOcean, ODIS, Coastal Measures, who are working on this. It's almost as if there needs to be some other coalescing layer, and maybe it's similar to like FASB, like the Financial Accounting Standards Board, or SASB, the Sustainability Accounting Standards Board, where it's a rationalization and aligning of structure, format, protocols. I'm spitballing here, but that the way to get what's already going a little faster.
One of the things that was mentioned a little bit earlier is the Ocean Data and Information System that the IOC of UNESCO is developing. And I spoke with those people who are managing and developing it last week, and they asked me to pitch this to you, the Bluetech and the corporate sector. It is a way to get your product, your data, to the global market by simply hanging out a shingle, if you will, a metadata shingle that describes your data, what it is, where it came from, what price you have on the data, what services and other technologies you might offer as well, into a forum that is openly accessible to other participants in it. They've developed this system, and each of those can be brought forward. Each of your products can be brought forward in this. So potentially that is the coalescing, overarching layer that you mentioned. We've run out of time. I'm getting the signal from the organizers. So thank you very much for listening to us. Thank you very much for my fellow panelists.